the degree of animosity that people have for Trump is actually somewhat of a mystery to me. I can't quite crack it. There's a class thing there, I would say. Elitist people are annoyed that someone like Trump, or someone who they think Trump is, has dared to enter the upper echelons. So there's something about it that's very classist. And Trump is a brash, salesman-y sort of character, right? I mean, he ran The Apprentice for years. He's a huckster. And I don't mean that in a denigrating way. I mean, part of what's made America great is its ability to sell, right? And there is that, the shadow side of the salesman is the huckster. And Trump straddles the line between salesman and huckster. And that also irritates, especially anti-capitalist, elitist, leftist types. But that's not all. There's more. What is it? Is it Trump's rough edges? There's that. Is it his proclivity to bully, which he does, and very effectively and sometimes very usefully? It's that. He's déclassé, and the elite types really hate that. They feel that he's contaminating their domain. It's something.
But I can't ask Aristotle a question. I mean, I can, but I won't get an answer. And so my hope is that in our lifetimes, we can make a tool of a new kind, of an interactive kind. And when I look at the personal computer, we're, as you know, living in the wake of the last revolution, which was a new source of free energy. And that was the free energy of petrochemicals, right? And it completely transformed society, and we're products of this petrochemical revolution, which is we're still living in the wake of today. We are now entering another revolution of free energy. A Macintosh, as you know, uses less power than a few of those light bulbs, and yet can save us a few hours a day or give us a whole new experience. And it's free intellectual energy. It's crude, very crude, but it's getting more refined year after year after year. And in our lifetimes, it should get very refined. And so my hope is someday, when the next Aristotle is alive, we can capture the underlying worldview of that Aristotle in a computer. And someday, some student will be able to not only read the words Aristotle wrote, but ask Aristotle a question and get an answer. And that's what I hope that we can do. So this is a beginning. I think that, as you know, right now the computer industry is in the tank. Personal computers, big computers, everything. And it's difficult. It's a difficult time. But I'm sure that Henry Ford had a few bad quarters back in the 1920s. And the automobile had a sort of historical imperative. It had, the minute it was invented, a sequence of events had to happen. The same is true with the personal computer. There is a tremendous momentum behind this. And I think that this year may be a delay. This year we may look back and say, well, 1985 was a slow year. But there is such momentum behind this that it will happen. It will permeate and change forever our educational processes. And my hope, again, is that not too many generations of students will pass through before this happens. It will happen within 20 years. It probably will happen within 10 years. But it could happen within 5 years.
I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand. Hello, hello. I don't understand why. Let me see. Do I have a mic on? I don't know. Yes, I might. I might have a mic on. So I don't understand why the sound's going off on this one when I click over to this one. So we're going to go back. And I'm going to show you.
Today you'll learn 6 easy ways to make people laugh and love being around you. The first is to play dumb. One way you can do this is to purposefully misunderstand something obvious.
Do you know what this is? Okay,
Yeah, you're supposed to. It's
I
like,
haven't taken a lot of pregnancy tests in my day. In fact, like almost none. I did pee on it, so don't look at the
so
pee
do you have
part.
COVID or no?
Dude.
Like, what's...
The key here is to act so oblivious it would be impossible to miss that you're joking.
You screen tested for Iron Man. Was that the
Okay,
original?
we're not going to listen to this, but what am I trying to do? I had a lot of fun this morning, make my 2 live streams. And I got the music from this guy's videos. This is a real-time. Now I'm going to go and try to expand this box, but it seems like the Brave browser drops out whenever I do this. So let's see what happens this time. Yeah, see? Pitch drive dropped out. Now that didn't used to happen. So maybe if I do a restart. But anyway, back to Brave. So we won't be... Anyway, this is where I got that music. Let's go back to this here. So this is a real-time dash cam journey from Newport to Swindon via the M4 motorway. Wait, what? What was that? What was that? saw somebody in the road. Oh yeah. Crazy ways, please stop. This is from the Subterranean Secret. Now let's go ahead and change the channel and listen to Jordan Peterson psychoanalyze Ben Shapiro. Now, the transition I'd like to see is one sound fade. Can we do that? And we're gonna give it a good long fade time. And then we'll go into studio mode. Is that right? Okay, transition. Oh, I'm not sure how to do this yet, but the idea would be this sound would fade out as the new sound comes in, so. But that's not going to happen. We're just going to go click a hard cut.
So, hi, Ben. I have in my hands a very dangerous document, indeed, which is your personality assessment.
I have to admit, I've never been as frightened of a conversation as the one that we're about to have. Alrighty, folks. So, my friend Jordan Peterson, he apparently has a personality test, a personality assessment. I'm going to be going through all of that today.
Ben Shapiro.
So let's jump right in. Okay, the following pages contain a series of items describing characteristics that may or may not apply to you. For each item, please use the scale to indicate the extent to which you feel the item describes you. I'm not interested in other people's problems.
No,
Strongly agree. I mean, honestly, like probably 4.
I'm not.
Respect authority. I mean, it's very difficult. Like, which authority? Like, my parents, 5. The government, like 1.
Plus, shut the hell up and don't bother me again.
Respect authority. I'll say, like, overall, societally, maybe a 4. Maybe. Believe that I am better than others. As a human being or at things. Those are not the same thing. See, neither agree nor disagree, probably.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
Seldom notice the emotional aspects of paintings and pictures. Yeah, probably. I mean, like, it's a painting. Whatever, man.
This is a no of a thing to say.
Okay, let's see the report.
Oh, for God's sake. Again we go.
We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, using the internet without ExpressVPN is like not paying attention to the safety demonstration on a flight.
Oh,
Virtually all of
stop.
the time, it's fine, but then...
Ben Shapiro started doing a commercial in the middle of my live stream. That's my fault. That's my fault. That is my fault. I just wanted to remind everybody that the next federal election in Canada will be October 25th, 2025, unless something else happens before that. Okay, let's see if we can get past the commercial.
And so you're low in anxiety, you're low in pain, because depression, for example, is a pain
I'm
phenomenon.
high in pain.
You're low in defensive aggression as well. And I think that's part of what makes you a formidable debater, you know, because you can keep your head and you're unlikely to be thrown by, well, anything
Interesting
that
points.
might emotionally annoy a more neurotic person.
Interesting points. Okay.
So you enjoyed your time in Los Angeles between 10 and 14?
I loved it.
There's been a lot of rumors
I don't know.
about child actors
I-
in Hollywood recently. What do you make of?
I quite enjoy listening to.
Let me return to Hollywood,
Why?
if you don't mind.
Peterson's doing lots of interviews. Lots of interviews. But can we find something else? So I thought that was really interesting about Steve Jobs and the AI. Oh, this is... Okay, let's transition. You can see what I'm looking at. One-on-one with Donald Trump, Dr. Phil. Let's see what happens.
It's a psychological interview that you're doing too. You're sort of being my psychiatrist.
You've been called every name in the book. Why do you subject yourself to this? What do you say to yourself when the crowds aren't cheering? What is the hardest, darkest moment? There's an addiction to revenge. Nobody would fault you. You can say, it ends here. It ends with me.
Our country's in tremendous danger of World War III, and I don't think I've ever said this on air before.
Last week, 12 jurors deliberated for 2 days and rendered a verdict finding Donald Trump guilty on all 34 charges of falsifying business records, leading to an unprecedented felony conviction of not only a former president, but also the front-runner nominee for the Republican Party. I traveled to Mar-a-Lago to sit down one-on-one with President Trump for an unfiltered, no-holds-barred interview. And I promise you, no topic was off limits. But I don't endorse candidates, so I want to sit down with President Biden and Kennedy as well, because everybody needs to vote, and not just vote, but make informed votes.
It's an honor to be with you. Let me just say, it's great looking at that logo. I've seen that sucker a long time.
Yeah. You look well.
I feel good.
Do you?
I feel good. No pressure.
Yeah.
It's nice to lead a life of no pressure whatsoever.
Yeah.
Corruption, surrounded by corrupt judges and corrupt politicians. Other than that, there's no pressure.
Well, you know, you and I talked the other night, and I work in trial sciences for a lot of my career, and so I have a particular interest in the dynamics of the trial setting.
You know, it was interesting when you called the other day about doing an interview. A lot of people want to do interviews, and I don't just agree to them very easily. But I've always had great respect for you. I watch your show, some of the real good ones, and some of the less intellectual ones, and that's okay too. But it's always been, you've always been very special. And I knew that you were, in some form, very much involved with trials. And I found it to be very interesting that you would take this up. It's a very important thing.
Well, I wanted to, and I know that there was some news coming out of Georgia today, there was some news coming out of Florida today, that they're stepping back from this. And
very good news.
I called for the other day, and I don't know if you saw it, but on Merritt Street Media, where I now do my show, I called for President Biden to stop all of this now. And of course, a lot of people said, oh, he can't stop it.
It's a psychological interview that you're doing.
That's an explanation for stupid people, but for people that understand how this works behind the scenes and all, I say the same thing. They need to stop this. They need to stop pursuing you. Since you started your campaign in 2015 to run for office, there have been so many attempts to get you off the board even before you started your campaign. Then once you were in office, 2 impeachment opportunities, they changed the rules to try to make it high crimes and misdemeanors if there were business conflicts, and in this case,
never ends.
It seems to be never ending, and that is a distraction to you. And I really wonder how that affects you. What do you say to yourself about that? Because it seems to never be ending.
It's a never-ending thing. There's a term that I know you've heard many times. It's called Trump derangement syndrome, and nobody's ever seen anything like it. In one way, we drive them totally crazy because we're doing the right thing. You wonder, why would somebody want to have open borders where people are coming in from jails, prisons, where they're coming in from mental institutions, and as you know better than anyone else, they're coming in, they're releasing the people all over the world, not just South America, from mental institutions and jails and prisons, and they're terrorists coming in by the thousands. They're pouring into our country. And who would allow this? You know, it's common sense, not a conservative thing. If they would devote that same skill and talent to making America great again, it would really be a wonderful thing. But in the meantime, we're beating them. You know, you mentioned I got impeached twice, and I won twice very easily, very quickly. We had great support from the Republican Party. I have all these cases all my life. I didn't have any problem, and all of a sudden, within a matter of months, sort of being my psychiatrist.
So they say, well, you know, if we're not, it makes everybody uncomfortable. Or is it better under this administration? My quality of life, my ability to pay for my children's lunches, tennis shoes, getting them to the dentist, getting all of the most vulnerable when nobody's looking, nobody's listening. Maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning, we wake up looking at the ceiling, thinking, what the hell am I doing? What do you say to yourselves when the crowds aren't cheering? when you're home alone, you're riding in the car, you're by yourself. What is the hardest, darkest moment?
Biden is just so bad. He's the worst president in the history of our country.
You should make a diss track on him.
Yeah, we'll do something.
Do you think that you're starting to soften your views on some of the networks that you may have not gotten along with in the past?
No, they're fake news.
He had a street fight this past week.
And how did it work out?
How you think, Mr. President?
I think he probably did pretty good. I've watched enough of you fighting.
Unidentified aerial phenomena in the sky. We don't know what they are. Do you?
It's very possible. Really powerful stuff. AI. They made a commercial, me promoting a product, and it wasn't me. And I said, did I make that commercial?
Rat beefs. Big rat beef just happened. Drake or Kendrick? Started. Download the Upside app. It's free. Also use my
I got along with Zelensky, but it wouldn't have happened. And October 7th would have never happened. And inflation would have never happened. And the withdrawal, the kind of withdrawal, we were getting out of Afghanistan with dignity and strength, but to get out the way, I think it was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. And I actually think...
I don't think there is a good argument for atheism.
Yeah.
What do you think? We're made in opposition to the spirit of the natural order? Is that your theory? Or we're random? Really? Random. That's your theory, is it? That's not a very smart theory.
Okay.
There's there's nothing random. There's some random mutation, and even that's not true.
Heinz with Aquinas gets the chance to speak with Jordan Peterson, and he takes this opportunity to ask Peterson about the best arguments for atheism, to which Peterson responds by absolutely ripping into atheism for 11 minutes straight. I'm gonna let this clip play out, and then I'm gonna get my thoughts on the back end. Let's get into it.
What do you think the best argument for atheism is?
I love this guy, this young kid here, this young man. What's his name? I've listened to him before. Jaden Forrest? Here's Jordan again.
Bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain?
And many years later, after Stephen Fry made these claims on Irish television, Jordan Peterson takes the opportunity to have him on his own show. And while he's there, he really presses him on some of these claims that he made that I just showed. And it leads to a rather interesting conversation about God. I'm going to let that video play out, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on the back end. Let's get into it.
Okay, I'm going to read something, and forgive me. No. I want to go here. You're face to face with God. Bone cancer in children. What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world where there is such misery? That's not our fault. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world so full of injustice and pain? And then one more, because the God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac, utter maniac. Ivan in the Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right. Now it's in, okay, so
Yes,
what
it's known
happens
as-
in the Brothers Karamazov is that Ivan wins the argument.
Yeah.
But Eloshia is the better person.
Completely
And-
so.
right-
And we
right,
love
right.
him.
So it's-
yeah. It's a
right,
book
so it's
everyone
very
should read.
interesting.
I would urge
Right.
everyone to read The Brothers Karamazov because I do think it's a work of genius. There's a lot about Dostoevsky I really dislike because of his influences. Again, people who don't understand Dostoevsky think he's a champion of right-wing religiosity. Without understanding that he went through an extraordinary life experience to come to where he did come, and that his novels show his full understanding of all kinds of different points of view. But in terms of the dialectic of that issue about how there can be a God, I mean, I was answering a question that I was asked.
I know, and I'm not
And
trying. I'm
of
not
course,
really not trying to put you on the spot.
My point is, I don't believe there is such a being. But if there were, and he were the kind of being that has been worshipped and described by various religions around the world, monotheistic religions, then I would have many bones to pick with him. But of course, I don't believe there is such a thing. But the argument from evil, as it's known, is a very old one, and it goes back through medieval religious figures as well as later humanists. That this idea that it is very hard to square this loving God who has knowledge of every hair on our head and adores us and adores little kittens. But he also, as I say, bone cancer in children, but also life cycles of insects whose whole aim is to burrow into the eyes of children in Africa and lay their eggs there and cause blindness for those children. I mean, you could quite easily picture a universe in which there weren't such an animal, and in which children were not sent blind with pain and horror by the various bugs and fungi and insects and viruses in the world. It isn't necessary.
There's a worm in Africa that burrows under the skin, and it's longworm. And if you can pull it out with a pencil and wrap it, but it breaks, it's fragile, and then it gets infected. It's a terrible thing. And a doctor recently made it his life's work to eradicate that and did it successfully.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so then I read what you wrote, and I mean, I take it very seriously, and I wasn't throwing it in your face.
No.
I brought it up actually because of what you said about Flaubert's attitude. You know, because what your statement lacks is exactly what Flaubert highlighted in that woman on her knees. And I'm not saying this is a simple solution, right? And I would say, so let's take the argument you made there. And there's a direction that goes in that's nihilistic and resentful and vengeful and angry and all understandable.
Yes.
But to me, it doesn't look to me like there's anything good in it. It looks like it's entirely counterproductive. It makes the problem it purports to have been generated by worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
a good point.
So then,
I'm looking forward to hearing what this young man has to say about this conversation. What do I have to say about this conversation? Yes. Well, when you take on the Bible, which is God's word, the gospel, and he teaches us how to live in that Bible, I think we can begin to understand that there are two forces. There's good and evil. And anyway, and that other force is what you don't want to follow. So figuring out how to walk that narrower path, and that is the narrower path, the very narrow path that Jesus walked, which was to do God's will, not his. And he did do that, and he died for our sins, for all the sins. So it's like there is a blood libel kind of thing on earth, and so and that's what the evil is. Anyway, that's some part of that. Okay, let's go back to listen to them a little more. I really just jumped right in there.
The question is, what's the appropriate attitude given that the argument you make is actually an extraordinarily powerful argument? And I don't know the answer to that, but I do know, I think, that resentment and anger, and even the motive that would make you want to say that to God himself, I think that's probably not helpful, even though it's so, well, I came to that with great difficulty. I mean, I've had my reasons to be resentful and angry, especially recently.
I've been reading through Job, and Job has reasons to be resentful and angry because God allows the devil or Satan to do whatever he wants to Job as long as he doesn't harm him or hurt him irrevocably. And it's quite long. I'm not all the way through it. Because Job has not sinned, and he does not know that this is what's going on. And the devil says, I will get Job to, he'll see if he's really faithful. This is like his big test. Anyway, and then there's a conversation Job has in the Bible. Okay, let's keep going on this.
And because I'm suffering a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And it makes me resentful and angry and wanting to shake my fist.
Yeah.
But I found upon intense consideration that there was nothing in that didn't make it worse, and that therefore that must be wrong. even though
I
it's
agree.
justifiable, right?
Jordan, I completely understand. And you must remember that my response was to a question I didn't see coming, and it was amused. It was because I don't believe in this God, it's not an issue. I'm not really resentful and angry about the fact that there's evil in the world. I'm sorrowful very often, and I'm united in my admiration for the fact and the real belief I have that most people, fundamentally, given this dysfunction or this deep trauma, most people are so good, are so anxious to be good, are deontically good, have a sense of obligation and drive in them to be better than they are. I think that's one of the key things that I love about humanity, is not just that we're
A little head shake there. I wonder what that's about.
dissatisfied with things that are wrong and can be improved, but that with ourselves we are dissatisfied, and that most of us want to be better. I know that's true of me all the time. Every time I go off to sleep, I think, how did I screw up today? How can I be better tomorrow? Why am I so bad at this? If only I could manage that. In moral terms, genuine moral terms.
Yes, I think that's an extraordinarily common experience and very much under-noticed.
Yeah.
And part of the reason, as far as I can tell, that the talks that I've been giving, let's say, have had the effect that they've had is because I do point out that that's an extraordinarily common experience.
Yeah.
That self-torture by conscience, and it does.
I think what we have is two kinds of. There's nothing humans can do on their own to save themselves, and that's why Jesus is here, or you have to go through Jesus. It's the only way to get up to God. It's the only way. And so that it's sort of been put together this way. And without that, you're not going to be able to save yourself.
Indicate this striving towards a higher mode of being. The other question I have when I look at the response that I just read is that the amount of the world's evil that's a consequence of our voluntary moral insufficiencies is indeterminate. So you might say, hypothetically speaking, that as part of God's creation, we actually have important work to do. And if we shirk it, the consequences are real. And you might say, well, that's just an apology for God. And perhaps that's the case. And perhaps there's no God at all. And so what the hell are we talking about? But I do think it's an important issue. I mean, your life is characterized by a stellar level of constant productive creativity. That's you, and you're offering that to the world, and that seems necessary. And maybe it's because the problems are real and important, and the role we have to play ethically is of paramount importance, truly.
Yeah.
Why else would we torture ourselves with conscience? And I would say that's the flowering of the religious instinct within you.
Well, you could describe it as that, but then, there are phrases. I mean, you used a phrase earlier, then I wanted to say, whoa, hang on, I'm not sure I know what that means, a higher mode of existence. I don't see. I remember having this argument with John Cleese, of all people, some years ago. He was a great lover of the Tibetan Book of the Dead and Gilbran and people like that. And I've always found them slightly hard to take. And he talked about I think the phrase he used was a higher level of consciousness. And I said, I don't, and again, this is my empiricist thing. It sounds cynical and skeptical. It's not meant to be, but what level? Who's at what? Describe a level. What is a higher mode? Why higher? What's higher than another? Are you saying it in terms of animals? It's a view. It's an old-fashioned Huxleyan view of evil.
So, the story in the Bible is that Jesus sent his only son. So he only has one son. And we humans are not. So, and for humans, we can walk in Jesus, which means asking Jesus into your heart. And that is how we change from being atoms and sinners walking around to walking on a different, having that higher level. So that to me, is what the level, it's a spiritual level. It's the level of where you're going to go when you pass away.
Evolution that most modern, Richard Dawkins, for example, most modern evolutionary scientists and so on, the ethologists would deprecate to say that there is a higher level of being, a higher mode of consciousness. Is it just like saying, well, you're better educated, you've read more, you know more? Is it you've somehow been enlightened, a Verklärungs effect, as the Germans would say, which is not necessarily intellectual, but is... I
think we're talking about Christianity here, becoming Christian, as the world becomes Christian. Because in the Bible, the story is that, what of Revelation is, well, it was the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of Rome, back in the 70th century AD, and this last 2,000 years has been because the church, the Christian church, is Jesus's bride, and it's the teaching of how to teach the bride. So the teachings are how men and women are to relate, how children are to relate to their parents, and then the example we have to follow is Jesus and his church is his bride. And this has been the long walk down the aisle, because eventually all nations will become Christians. Christian, that's God's, that's the plan, that's the long-term plan.
Is somehow spiritual, and if so, show me an example of it. Show me someone who has a higher mode of existence than I do, or the. I
can answer that. I think to some degree.
Yeah.
Three ways.
I look forward to hearing this.
One, that higher mode of existence is what your conscience tortures you for not attaining.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
I think what my conscience tortures me for not attaining is that I was rude to someone yesterday and I shouldn't have been.
Right, but it's the shouldn't part of it.
Yes, the obligation. It's the
exactly.
David Hume, the problem of ought. Yeah.
Well, and then you think about how it manifests itself. You don't. This is why Nietzsche was wrong. You cannot create your own values.
Right.
The values impose themselves on you independent of your will. Now, maybe well, that's what your conscience does, and good luck trying to control it.
This is very anti-Nietzsche, isn't it?
Well, I'm a great admirer.
I know you are. That's why I made the point. It's very opposite to his philosophy.
But so Jung embarked on a lengthy critique of Nietzsche, and it's part of his work that isn't well known, I would say. We'll leave that be, except to say that the psychoanalysts, starting with Freud, well, not really, but popularized by Freud and systematized, showed that we weren't masters in our own psychological house.
Right.
There were autonomous entities, and those would be the Greek gods to some degree that operated within us, and we were.
Which is Julian James's point, exactly. Yes.
We're in. Yes. I have my problem with James, but as a overarching idea, there's interest in it. Okay, so there are things happening with us and to us in the moral domain that we cannot control.
Yeah.
And that stunned me when I first learned it as a proposition. It's, oh yes, look at that. Here's one. What are you interested in?
Yeah.
Well, that grips you. Okay. Number two, what does your conscience bother you about? Okay. You're inadequate by your own standards. Now, what adequate would mean, that's a different question, but it's defined negatively by conscience.
Yes.
And then better, there's one that I said I would lay out three. You can look at Jean Piaget's work on developmental psychology.
On the development of the subject, yes.
He was a genetic epistemologist.
Yes,
and what he wanted to do was, this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to unite science and religion. That was his goal. And he wanted to look at the empirical development of values. And what he concluded, at least in part, was that a moral stance that's better than a previous moral stance does all the things that the previous moral stance does, plus something else.
Yes. Yes.
And you can say the same thing as a scientific theory.
I remember I had a great, I loved Piaget, and his observation was so empirical, of course.
Yes,
maybe,
absolutely.
Of the development of the child and the not quite the theory of mind, that wasn't his thing, but similar developments and signposts where people become aware of self.
Okay, so now Piaget looked specifically at the development of morality, and he was one of the first people to emphasize the importance of games.
Yeah.
And what he showed was that at 2 years old, let's say, a child can only play a game with him or herself.
Yeah.
But at 3, both children can identify an aim and then share it in a fictional world. And so that's partly pretend play and the beginnings of drama, and then cooperate and compete within that domain.
Yeah.
And then what happens, and the game theorists have shown this, is that out of games, morality emerges.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example, and this is a crucial example. So if you pair juvenile rats together, the males, they have to play. They have to rough and tumble play because their prefrontal cortexes don't develop properly if they don't. Anyways, they have to play. You pair a big rat and a little rat, teenage rats together, and the big rat will stomp the little rat.
Yeah.
First encounter. So then you say power determines hierarchy.
Yeah.
Okay, but then you pair the rats multiple times, like 50.
Yeah.
Then if the big rat doesn't let the little rat win 30% of the time, the little rat will stop inviting him to play.
Wow.
And so you get an emergent reciprocity even at the level of the rat.
Yeah. That is, and it's fascinating, isn't it?
Jordan Peterson may not realize it, but when he's talking about consciousness here, he's tapping into a very crucial biblical truth that I think is a crucial component to identifying one of the strongest cases for the existence of God found in the moral argument. There are 4 points to the moral argument which go as follows. Number 1 is the existence of a moral conscience within us. We have this internal moral compass which helps us distinguish between right and wrong. Number 2, the fact that we feel condemned sometimes. The Bible says in Romans 2:15 that we demonstrate that God's law is written on their hearts, for their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them they are doing right. It's also important to note that our conscience is not one-to-one reflective of God's law, and that it can be hardened or softened or corrupted. And number 3, it leads into our need for a moral lawgiver. Since we have a moral conscience and we feel condemned, there is some outside transcendent source for our morality that is outside of control, just like Jordan Peterson was saying in the video. And that leads to number 4, which is that this moral lawgiver is God. God serves as the objective moral foundation for all of the consciousness within us, because by definition, he is transcendent, eternal, timeless, and unchanging, which is what would be required to establish such an objective moral framework. And Stephen Fry is using the existence of evil and injustice as an argument against God, but he's failing to recognize that just claiming that evil exists can actually be used to support the existence of God. C.S. Lewis wrote that my argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. And I think C.S. Lewis is exactly right. Without God, there is not a moral authority to label something unjust. It just boils down and reduces into a matter of opinion, a matter of taste. And for intellectual consistency, Fry's claims on the world being unjust have to be viewed as an opinion rather than a fact. But I'm convinced that in this world that there is a lot of evil and suffering, and I think you should be convinced of that too. But without God, we can't quite say that. There's no basis for our claim outside of just a mere opinion, but not so much a fact, as I was saying earlier. With that being said, if you want to learn more about the evidence for God, I really recommend you check out the video on screen right about there. Hey y'all, I also forgot to mention that I have some really exciting news I wanted to share with you, and that is that about a week ago, I got engaged. I got engaged to a beautiful woman, and a God-fearing woman at that, and I am just as happy as can be. I'll throw up a picture on screen. Man, I just wanted to share that. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye-bye. I'm so happy.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's like really a sharp kid. Not a kid. I guess he's a young man. He's about to get married. Congratulations, Jaden Forrest. And that's it for today. So we're going to stop streaming with this moment. And that was fun today, doing my playing on my computer. Talk to you again. Bye.